Happy Wednesday, my friend. It is so good to see you on this bright and shiny day. I hope it is bright and shiny wherever you are as well. If you haven't already, say hi and join Danny and Sam and Valerie and Magda in the chat by letting us know where you're coming in from and perhaps what is in your cup. I'm coming in from Austin, Texas with some delicious mint tea, so I'm looking forward to hear where you are coming in from. As always, we meet here every single week to combine our learnings with other smart, talented, and interesting people. And today is no exception because I have a very special guest who is joining us for coffee who I think you are going to learn a lot from. And I think that because I learn a lot from her. So if I learn a lot, I think there's a good chance that you're going to learn a lot too. Hopefully you did some Google stalking on our guest, but if you didn't, no worries. I'm going to catch you up. The guest that is joining us today is Jess Ekstrom. You may think to yourself, that name sounds a little familiar, and it might for a myriad of reasons. So Jess started an amazing organization called Headbands for Hope. You might have seen it on the Today Show or Good Morning America, where for every headband that you purchase, one is donated to a kid with cancer. So obviously a very worthy cause, but Jess did not stop there. Her entrepreneurial skills just kept on going, and she has started multiple businesses since then and written multiple books. So her first book, Chasing the Bright Side, was an inspiring tale all about how you can start to think like an entrepreneur and really get in that mindset of chasing after your biggest, wildest dreams. So I thought it would be interesting to bring her on as we start to close out 2022, because there might be some people joining us, whether that is Justin or Jonathan or Jim or Alexandria or Brian or Miriam, that are thinking to themselves, I need to get a little more entrepreneurial as I kick off 2023. That might be a little more entrepreneurial when it comes to work and kind of telling your boss you're ready for new projects or you're ready to lead the team. Or it might be a little more entrepreneurial in real life, such as starting a side hustle or maybe even starting your very own business. But I think that entrepreneurial spirit could be something that you want to kick off the new year with. But Jess has also written a brand new book that we're going to talk about called Create Your Bright Ideas. This one is aimed at tiny humans. So if you have tiny humans in your life, nieces, nephews, kids of your own, the holidays are coming up. And while we all like to give stuffed animals and makeup and Barbie dream houses and Hot Wheels and cars, I also love, I know this is dorky, I also love the good educational gift. I know it's just super dorky, but I also love a good educational gift because I do think that we can have fun and learn with these kids at the exact same time. So I think this could be a good gift idea for you or other tiny humans in your life. So please, wherever you are, hopefully Andrew and John and Jeff and Lizani can raise their glasses with me and welcome Jess to our coffee chat.
Hello, good to see you.
So good to see you as well. How are you?
Good. I was just going through the chat while I was listening to, I was like, I think we have the whole globe covered. It's amazing.
We do. I feel like we have New Zealand, Peru, the Netherlands, New Jersey, Finland, Vancouver. It's a little bit of everything.
I know. And I was waiting for North Carolina. I don't know if we have any North Carolina viewers, but that's where I am. But so cool to see people from all across the globe be here today. But it's so good to see you. Thanks for having me.
Well, I'm so excited. And I think it just goes to show that all across the globe, we all need that sort of entrepreneurial kick in the butt. That's sort of like, how do we get out there, chase after our big dreams, chase after the things you want? And I feel like you are the perfect person to talk about this because that's what you've been doing the past decade.
Well, you as well. I mean, and it was so funny when you and I were talking before. I was like, I feel like this is just a slam dunk. Like, create your bright ideas only. Like, we have been swimming in the same lane for years, and I've just been so glad that we could support each other. But I think you hit the nail on the head too. It's like, I think that of course, entrepreneurship in its most literal sense might mean starting a business, but really, I think that it's more about being entrepreneurially minded. Like, how can we start looking at the world through a lens that we could fix it, whether that's in our jobs, our communities, or how we're raising our kids. So that's where Create Your Bright Ideas came from, and excited to just dive into it today.
And so I'm curious, do you find that when you were kind of writing the book, that obviously it's aimed towards tinier humans, tinier kinds of humans, but do you think that the principles are still the same, that the advice that you would give, a fellow 30 something that's looking to take on a new project at work would be the same advice that you would give a third grader?
I think that is spot on, not just for Create Your Bright Ideas, but for most kids products, or kids books. And what I mean by that is, I do a lot of speaking, and I train other women to become speakers through Mic Drop Workshop. And one of the foundations that we teach on is sometimes the lessons that we all need to hear are the lessons that we learned in kindergarten. And sometimes the things we don't also want to have to think that hard. And so sometimes people will ask, well, if you're going to speak to Fortune 500 CEOs versus speaking to an auditorium of high schoolers, how does your message shift? And I'm like, it really doesn't. And a lot of times, the things that we need to hear, no matter where we're at in our life or our career, are the things that we needed to be reminded of as kids. So in Create Your Bright Ideas, it's for teens, tweens, and kids. But really, I mean, there's journaling, coloring, and all these entrepreneurial lessons and stories that we could all use as adults too, let's be honest.
What do you think is the biggest one that seems to resonate with people the most, that you kind of find yourself saying over and over and over again?
I would say it's 3 words: inspiration from frustration. And I think so much we want to think of our next big business idea or wait for our aha moment. But most of the time, I think the best ideas come from when we're frustrated about something. If you're, I think of, Jeff Hoffman, who was tired of waiting in line at airports when he didn't need to check a bag and he needed a boarding pass. And so he created the airport kiosk so you could just do that on your own. And so that those times when you're frustrated, it's well, where could this be improved? What could be done better? And again, that could be a business idea or not. But inspiration from frustration, I think, is what echoes the most when I think about entrepreneurship, and definitely what's been consistent in starting Headbands of Hope or Mic Drop Workshop, or the ideas that I've, pursued over the past 10 years. It's been from a moment where I thought something could be done better or more efficiently, or a need that wasn't being met. And so I think that's we put a lot of pressure on ourselves to start the next, Spotify or Airbnb, but really I'm where are the moments that you're frustrated about something, and how could you be the one to make it better?
I think really what's interesting is how can you be that inspiration for other people? Because I think one of the things that translates, to your point, not only to young people, but also I know as somebody who has led teams of people before, sometimes it's not hard for me to get inspired. I can kind of zhush myself up, but sometimes it's how do I make other people on my team kind of get the oomph, or the flame under their butt? And then the same way, I think, how do you inspire kids when so much of the time, again, I'll speak for myself, you're not cool. Adults aren't cool. You say something and you're a loser. You know what I mean?
Know.
It's why am I listening to you? So I think that it's that same thing. And especially when you're leading a team, some people are oh, well, of course the boss is obnoxiously motivated. What does that mean for me? So how do you tackle that? A, within, your own leadership and your own teams that you've started. And then B, how did you tackle that in the book?
Yeah. Well, first of all, so many things you said were making me laugh. One, because I think I told you this, but I'm 7 months pregnant with my first kid right now. So if I start sweating or if I'm out of breath, that's why. But I'm I've already accepted the fact that she's not going to think I'm cool. And so I'm already processing that. and two, I saw this like funny TikTok the other day of like, a founder like going away on a bird scooter, and it's like the caption was like the founder changes the entire direction of the company based on something that he heard on a podcast. And it's like, founders' energy around certain ideas or like, strategy can be great, but it can also be like very whimsical. And so what I think is, when it comes to pumping up your team or the people that are around you or getting people to equally like believe in what you're doing. I know something that, we do at Headbands of Hope, we call it, so real quick for anyone who isn't familiar with Headbands of Hope, it's a company I started when I was in college, which was, we're now 10 years old, which is crazy. And for every headband sold, we donate one to a child with an illness. And we've donated over 2 million headbands, and we actually just launched in Kohl's last week, which I'm very excited about. But we have something that we call a smile file. And so anytime we get any kind of sign or like response that shows like why we started. So maybe it's, an email from a parent whose child got a headband in the hospital, or maybe it's like pictures of kids who got their headbands, or hospitals like sending a thank you letter. We put it in our smile file, and it's kind of like our North Star for our business. It's like anytime we're feeling frustrated or we just need that reminder of like, yeah, this is the itch that you're scratching. This was the inspiration from the frustration. We go to that smile file. It was hard during the pandemic when we weren't actually physically able to go into hospitals, as much. So that smile file came into handy. But there was actually this study that I'll reference for this too, at UC Berkeley, and this college professor had his class write I am statements, like I am blank. And he didn't give any kind of direction or, examples. He was just like, write as many I am statements as you can. And he split up the class in two. He put half of the class in a hallway that was just like looking at a blank wall, and the other half of the class in the life sciences building where they were looking at like a huge Tyrannosaurus like skeleton, like a real life skeleton. And from when he would run this with different classes, he would find that the students who wrote their I am statements in the life sciences building in front of the T-Rex skeleton wrote much like bigger, larger, and more in-depth I am statements than the ones who were sitting in the hallway. And what he was realizing is that like when you're in the presence of something that reminds you like that you're a part of something bigger, you start self-identifying as something bigger. And so I know that that's like, a roundabout way to getting back to how to mobilize your teams or the people around you. But I think about that, like whenever I have an idea or a book that I want to launch, like, and I can see it, how do I get other people to see that T-Rex too and believe that they're a part of something bigger rather than just selling a headband or launching a book or doing a podcast? It's like, let's, remind ourselves what the T-Rex is, so that way our jobs and what we do every day, we can self-identify with something bigger than us.
Well, and I think that I think is the hardest thing, is like, how do we keep coming back to that message over and over again? And I think it's a really interesting point. And also I think it's a hard point to find specifically in corporate America. I think that sometimes that you're in these like huge teams, these like massive organizations, and you're like, I am a dot on the board. Like I am like a little flick. And so I think for me, when I was working in those organizations, it was more like, how can I make a difference, at least in my core group, or at least with those around me? Because I think we also, and that's something that I think you've also done a brilliant job at, is really coming back to that human connection, that it's not just about selling headbands. It's not just about selling books. It's about one human helping another human through a frustration, obstacle, hard time. And so I'm really excited at this new book that you're writing, because I think that that's something that the next generation, I don't know, I sometimes get really depressed with like the Kardashians and all this stuff and the TikToks where I'm like, where are we going? Like,
Yeah.
what's going to be left for us all? And so that's
Yeah.
why I'm so excited about your book, because that's the type of thing. And I know I mentioned it earlier, but like with the holidays coming up, I'm like, no more giving lip gloss. Like, let's
Yeah.
give inspirational stuff.
Totally. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And I think, what I find interesting is like Junior Achievement did a study this year where like 60% of teens want to start their own business versus work a regular 9 to 5 job. But what I think is sometimes unclear in this like creator economy with like every kid, wanting to be an influencer or grow a following is like, okay, do they want attention or do they want success? Because those are two completely different things. And this isn't just for teens. This is for anyone. It can get confusing. Even for me, I'm like, am I doing this for attention or am I doing this because of the success that I want? And attention and success are not codependent. And you can be successful when no one's looking, and you can also have attention without success. And so where Create Your Bright Ideas comes into play is like finding this overlap of, like, if you can imagine a Venn diagram where you have the things that that you love to do, like your talent, the things that bring you a lot of joy. Maybe it's working with people, maybe it's creating, whatever it might be. And then finding that overlap where, like, where can that talent help serve a need? Like, where are like the frustrations in the world or those gaps? And how can you find that overlap between your talents and the world's needs to create that impact? So I think like one of the reasons that I wrote Create Your Bright Ideas specifically for teens and tweens is because, yes, we can all chase attention. Like, that is very easy to hit, live, like post, record, whatever. But what are we pointing it towards at the end of the day? Like, what do we want to use a microphone for? What do we want to use our time, talent, followers for? Because I think that, success is really not what it looks like to others. It's only what it feels like to you. And it can be really tough to keep thinking that next achievement, like, oh, well, once I hit, X amount of followers, or once I get, whatever, insert TEDx talk or whatever it might be, then I'll feel like I've done it. And then you realize, like, when those things start to happen, you just keep moving the goalpost. You're just like, okay, well, now I have that. If I've done a TEDx talk, well, now I need to get a book deal, or now I need to do this. And you never feel that like euphoria that you're going, that like that you think you're going to feel. And what's also interesting, that I found when I was like studying this is like that pursuit of ideas is we actually get the hit of dopamine, like that happiness, not at the finish line, but when we feel like we're close to it. So we actually get the feeling that we're chasing in the process, not in the result. And so if we can learn to like love the build or love the part of it that we're actually creating, then maybe we can enjoy like the time spent before the result. And that way we don't feel so empty after the result happens.
Well, and I think that's so important to fall in love with the build and fall in love with the process. And I saw Jeff's question here and I want to get to it, but I want to also add a second part in here because it was something that actually got brought to my attention on Monday of this week. So I'll bring it up to you as if we're not joined by other people, because this is for me too.
Yeah.
But Jeff's question is, do you think that parents should encourage entrepreneurism, in young people? But I will tell you about this thing that happened on Monday as well, which was I got contacted by an organization and they were kind of going through the different topics that I could talk to their teams about. And the person that I was talking to, who shall remain nameless, was like, but don't touch on entrepreneurship. Like, don't touch on anything entrepreneurial, because, my biggest fear is that my team gets too inspired and leaves. So
yeah,
there was like this real fear, quite frankly,
yeah,
of like what entrepreneurism can mean within an organization. I think that's a little sheltered because I think it doesn't mean your team gets up and walks out the door.
yeah.
But I'm curious for you, one, to Jeff's point, more along like the parent and young people, but then even just like in corporate with, your team or leaders, how that can affect that sort of entrepreneurial thinking?
Well, I'll touch on the corporate side first because I've had the same feedback, before I go into not feedback, but like before I give a talk, they're like, well, don't tell everyone to get up and leave. And I'm like, oh yeah, because that's what I'm going to do. I'm just like, here's the door. Like, let's start your ideas. But it makes me think about companies like Zappos. Like I spoke at Zappos a year or two ago, and they are a company that like they want their people starting businesses because they know that the aftermath of thinking like an entrepreneur will also make you a better employee, and they're not mutually exclusive. So when I was speaking at Zappos, they even showed me their like accelerator that they have for like when you're at work, you can also come down here and start playing with your ideas or start making your product. And so I think companies like that really see the connection of like, if I can think like an entrepreneur starting my own business or side hustle, I'll also be a better employee. But to Jeff's point of whether or not parents should encourage entrepreneurialism, I think that, I'll tell you my personal, parenting story and then what I think about it. So I watched my dad, when I was a kid, start a business when I was in middle school. And I remember when he like sat us down for a family meeting and was like, I want to start my business. I want to quit my day job. I want the blessing, of all me and my sister, my mom. And I remember my sister and my mom were like hugging him and asking him questions about his business. And I was like, what's for dinner? Like, couldn't have cared less. But then I saw him like renovate our upstairs bathroom into his office and just like pour everything he had into this business idea that my mom ended up like working on with him. They grew it for 10 years, eventually sold it. And now they are park rangers and living full-time in an RV. True story. But anyways, I remember after he started the business, we went on this camping trip and I was going into like my rebellious teenage years. And so I brought like my Walkman because that's how long ago it was to like listen to music. I was like, I don't want to listen to Babbling Brook. Like I want to listen to Backstreet Boys. And my headphone cords were getting tangled in a knot. And I was getting so frustrated that my headphones like kept getting tangled as I was listening to music. And I said to my dad, I was like, headphone cords should just roll up like a slinky so they don't have to get tangled anymore. And then I was like, well, I'll just be like you and I'm going to invent that like you invented yours. It's like, how hard could it be? And then I remember he sat me down and he was like super serious about this. And he's not like a serious guy. So I was like, something's coming. And he told me that was something that had already been invented, but he was like, I want you to keep thinking that way. Like, keep doing what you just did. Anytime you think that something could be done better, think of a solution to fix it. And I feel like that was him encouraging me to be an entrepreneur without saying, start a business. And so from that moment on, like anytime I was like, man, I wish that like, shoelaces would do this or something, even though a lot of those ideas I didn't start, just having the courage and the permission to entertain them taught me a lot about myself, taught me a lot about like what I wanted to do in the world. And so by the time I was in college and had that internship at Make-A-Wish where I saw a lot of kids that were losing their hair to chemotherapy and wanting to wear headbands as opposed to wigs or hats, I had already been training that like reaction muscle of like problem solution because of the way my parents raised me. And so that's, where create your bright ideas came into play, is like not like force all kids to like start a business and, create their own LLC, but like, how can you start like getting repetitions of that muscle of problem solution instead of, oh no, there's a problem, and I think kids are more creative than we sometimes give them credit for. And I've been doing like a book tour with Girls on the Run. And I've been like asking them what some of their business ideas are. And they just come up with the best ideas. Like one girl was like, I care a lot about animals and I want to, but I want, people to have fun. And so I want to create an arcade that's also an animal shelter where people can come in and play games and pet dogs and then take them home with them. I'm like, that's brilliant. I will invest in that. But yeah, so long story short, I think that parents should encourage entrepreneurial thinking without the pressure to start a business.
Well, and I think that it's really, to Liz's point, it's about following your own ideas. So really
Exactly.
that's sort of the I guess like inkling. And that's one thing that I'll tell you what, I pushed back on Monday with this organization and was basically saying, listen, I've been on both sides of the coin. I've worked in corporate and I've also started my own business, and and I've also hired people in my own business. And I can single-handedly tell you the best people I have ever hired have that sort of entrepreneurial thinking, because you can't teach it. I can't teach you to wake up every day wanting to solve a problem. I can teach you how to use Excel. I can teach you how to use PowerPoint. I can teach you how to shape an email. Like, I can teach you how to do the things, but I can't teach you to wake up and say, oh, that's a problem. That's not my job. Not that that's not in my job description. Well, that's somebody else's team. That's not my team. I need you to see that problem, and I need you to not only tackle it, but come to me with 3 potential solutions. Not just go, there's a problem. I can do that. I can identify lots of problems.
Anyone can send out a flare. Yep.
Exactly. I need somebody that's going to tackle it and solve it. And I have found, and trust me, I mean, I'm sure you've tried as well. I've tried for a decade. You cannot teach that skill. Maybe one day someone will invent a magic pill or a magic podcast that you can listen to, but you cannot teach that at all. But it is one of the most valuable things.
Well, and even if your idea fails, it is you have so much more information than you did before. And, one of the things that I know I agree with you. Sometimes entrepreneurship, it's you can't teach someone to be entrepreneurial. They have to walk through it. But it's little things that I do in my company now that I'm trying to, I hate using the word empower because I feel like it sounds trying to empower my people is anytime you're going to ask a question, instead of hey, what color do you want this? Or where should we put the link in here? If you're going to ask that question, tell me what you think we should do with it. Here's why I think we should it should be purple, and that way, one, it's not the constant burden of answering questions with a blank slate for me. But 2, it's also, I can either say yes, great job, or no, and here's why. So you can learn that way of thinking. So there's things that you can do within a company, but the best way to be able to teach entrepreneurship is by walking through it. And I think that you realize that sometimes starting your ideas is not as much about strategy as it is about trial and error. And how quick can you test things and with the least amount of resources and time? And how can you learn on the fly, which is one of the biggest things I think it comes to testing your ideas.
Oh my gosh. And the faster you can test things, I always say too, nothing makes me happier than when I'm working with someone and they say, here's an idea, but just so you know, I tried these other 3 and they didn't work. Because then I might read their email and say well, have you thought of this? Having no idea that they already tried those 3 things. Yeah. So why am I sitting here brainstorming it? So it's even if you have an idea, list the other 3 that you already tried that didn't work.
Exactly. I think that sometimes, especially when you're leading people, they want to fill you with good news. They want to say here's, the wins that we had this week. Yes. I don't care. I mean, I love it. Let's celebrate it. But I am equally as interested in the things that you tried that didn't go well. And so I think it's almost the parent pleasing fallacy too, where it's you only want to tell them the good things that have happened. And sometimes in these employee dynamics, it's the same way. And I'm I welcome information that you're hey, we thought that, this ad campaign would do well, but it didn't, but here's our learnings from it. I think that should be celebrated just as equally as someone coming to me with a win.
I'm curious, do you, as you start to practice practice these lessons in real life, did you have real life instances? Because obviously now this is your second book. So did you have real examples where like, you're like, I tried these things for the first book. Like I thought they were going to be great. And it turns out maybe not so much, maybe that idea or that marketing idea didn't work. So now that I have the second book, do you find yourself iterating a lot based on the first book, or because the first book was more geared towards adults and this is more, geared towards young people, is it a totally clean slate?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. I think sometimes it's a double-edged sword that I found. Like when we have the gift of information from experience, it can help us make better decisions, but it can also put us in sometimes a bit of like, what do they call it? Sophomore syndrome, where you're doing something again and you're like, well, is it going to be as good as the first one? So I've definitely experienced that mentally of chasing the bright side was a big success, which was awesome. And so when you come out with another book or whatever, your second business or whatever, you like, people are like, oh, is it going to hit that same, potential or same sales numbers? And so I've been battling that a little bit as we approach launch next week. And I'm trying to just like silence that a little bit. But to your point of, what did I learn in that first run? I think that this is also like, not just for books, but ideas or anything. I mean, chasing the bright side was like in terms of marketing, like throwing spaghetti at a wall, seeing what sticks. I don't know how I was awake. I think I saw you, like we were at an event together one week, during launch week. I was everywhere, like any press show that would have me, any podcasts and like all of these things. And it was great. But I also now have all this data of like what moved the needle and what didn't. And I actually found the like doing things like this with you or plugging into communities were more impactful than like being featured in People magazine or like going on the Today Show, which is funny because it's the thing that you dream of. Like when you start a business or you launch a book or something, you like dream of like the really shiny moments that you can be like, I am thrilled to report that, I was people's like, chasing the bright side was Apple's audio pick of the month. And it's like, those are the things that you're just like, oh my gosh, if I could just get that. But truly, when I looked at the sales spikes, it came from being more intimate and having conversations like with smaller but more niche audiences that moved the needle. And so that's where most of my focus has been this time, is like, how do I actually talk and get in front of the right people, talk to people who I'm inspired by, like you, and spread the word that way instead of like chasing the, like the horse and the carrot. And granted, some of those things might work out, but I'm not holding my breath like I was last time. And even though they did, I wasn't like blown away by what the sales numbers were from those moments.
Well, and it kind of reminds me of the things that sometimes you think matter a lot don't actually matter in the end. Like I remember back to like my recovering people pleaser ways, for me, it was like, oh my gosh, like all I want to do is make my boss really happy. And like, that's important, making your boss really happy. But what I realized as seeing an example from somebody else, there was someone, I was on the marketing team, but I saw somebody on the sales team, and the higher ups loved this one salesperson, but the rest of the sales team hated her. And so what I realized was like, what really matters is like, are the people around you and is the team around you, like, have they bought in? Like, are you kind of like the bigger, the better? Because you might think, oh, well, it's just about making my boss happy. But if the rest of the team like despises you, like not good, like not great.
Yeah. And all of a sudden you look around and realize that no one's in your corner. And like, what did you have to do to get there? There's actually something that I put in Chasing the Bright Side that I also put in Create Your Bright Ideas. And it's like literally the only overlap between the two books. And I call it the purpose test. And we can all do it if you want right now, because it reminds me of that. And so, okay, just imagine for a second. I won't make you close your eyes or do anything stupid, but so think about the thing that you're chasing right now. Like, what is that, like horse and the carrot, the thing that you want so bad that you're going after? Imagine if you got that thing, like you got it, whatever it was yours, but nobody knew it was you. Like Kim's name couldn't be on it. Like my name couldn't be on it. No one knew it was me. It was totally anonymous. Would you still want that thing? Because I think like there's times in my career where I've really chased after something that, like, when I really think about it, was purely for the recognition. And then there's times where I've chased something that I'm like, if I got this, like hit like 2 million headbands donated or launched this, like, art therapy program in hospitals, like, yeah, I would still want that to happen. I don't care if people know it was me. And so and I'm not saying that we have to like swat away trophies or like, be totally anonymous with our success. But I think it's a good gut check sometimes of like, are we chasing something based on how it looks or based on how it feels? And we can still chase things based on how it looks, but it should still be meaningful to us.
Well, it should still make you feel something. It should still make you get excited or get passionate. To your point, even if you are helping kids and people have no idea who it is, would you do that same work anonymously? But it is a really interesting question, because I do think a lot of times we are definitely sometimes driven by ego without even realizing it. So I feel like that's a good test to kind of sit back and evaluate a bigger picture of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah. And another thing too, when it comes to like our own goal setting or career setting, part of the reason like I think entrepreneurship is so great is because you get to paint your own canvas. Like you get to figure out what it is that you want to create and you get that control. But sometimes I think that, we set goals that are in control from someone else. So for example, with this book, I could have a goal of, I want Create Your Bright Ideas to be on the New York Times bestseller list. That's not a goal that I can control. Or I could have a goal that says, I want to create a book that helps kids think like an entrepreneur. That is 100% within my control. And so sometimes like when we think about like the horse and the carrot and those things that we're chasing, is it a goal that we can actually like have that, control of our own destiny, or are we putting it in someone else's hands? Because sometimes it's so easy to like say our goals, but at the end of the day, it's for someone else to decide. So what are the goals that you can actually control, the things that you want to do? Writing a book is 100% in your control. Like selling X amount of copies or getting on XYZ list or getting on Oprah's favorite things, like you can still aim for those things, but those shouldn't be your final destination.
No. And if they are your final destination, then that goes back to your purpose question. It really means you're being driven by the ego and not necessarily the purpose of why you're doing what you're doing.
Exactly. And I'll tell you, like, the work is better for it. Like, I think about it, sometimes we have two different types of ambition. And I'm sure like you've experienced this, where there's some days, I call it anxious ambition and inspired ambition. There's some days where you really like want to work, but it's for two completely different reasons. Like anxious ambition comes from when we're working because we feel like we're like behind or we're comparing ourselves to someone else, or like she started a podcast, I need to start a podcast. But inspired ambition comes from when we feel like we're solving a problem, we're making something better. When I work from a place of inspired ambition, 10 times better work than when I work from a place of anxious ambition. And so like, if we're working because we feel like we're behind or trying to replicate what someone else is doing, then you might get the work done, but it's not going to be as impactful or as effective as if it came from a place of inspired ambition.
Wow. That one hit, because I feel like I have had a foot in both of those worlds several times in the last couple of weeks. It's huge.
It really, huge. I mean, and I'm the same way. Oh, I guess you don't have to say like where you're feeling it, but that's something you've been feeling.
Oh, well, I mean, I think, I don't know if you do this, but as we get towards the end of the year, like November, December, I start to think about like, okay, I do this thing in December, just kind of like with myself, kind of like reviewing the year and what did you accomplish and what did you set out to do and all that sort of stuff. And so in November, I start to just kind of like compile just like kind of like taking the Post-its, like starting
Yeah.
to compile all the things so that when I sit down in December, it's kind of like all there. And so, as I start to look back on stuff from January, it's like, ooh, I didn't accomplish that. Like, so should I try in these last couple of weeks to just like, whoa, like, and it's like,
Right.
whoa, calm down. Maybe that just, it wasn't for this season, or maybe it's going to come at some point in the future. But there is some of that anxious energy or that anxious accomplish or that real need to like check things off. Like, ugh,
Totally.
I did it. That as we kind of get into November, December, I sometimes find myself getting a little more drawn to, because I feel like, oh, I got to bring it in, got to land the plane, like got to bring it in for the
Yeah.
home stretch. And so, and that's hard because obviously the holidays are all about like relaxing and spending time with friends and family.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly. So that is definitely something that I have started to feel as we kind of hit November, but I'm trying to keep in perspective, or keep like at bay.
It's funny how the end of the year kind of brings that out in some of the who I see a lot of your listeners and people on here are like those achiever mindset. It's like, wait, but did I, like, my year in review, what did it look like? Did I accomplish what I was set to accomplish? And the beginning of the year can have that same anxiety for me. It's like I always used to dread, like, at Headbands of Hope, when we would make it through the holidays, like hit whatever number we did for our year, and then it's like I would literally think about the clock striking 12 and being at 0, and then being like, here we go again. What, like, exactly. And so, something that has been helpful for me, which, it could be helpful for you or anyone listening, is like, I just have to remind myself that there are endless winning scenarios that, like, I don't even know exist yet. And so the things that I want with my life, like, I try to hold it with an open palm instead of a clenched fist. Like, there are things that have happened to me this year, and I'm sure with you too, Kim, that were not on your vision board. Like, they were not on your, like, at the beginning of the year, I want to do this, but yet they still presented that opportunity to you, even though it was like, I didn't even know that I could, be in the running for this, or have, a potential like show or something like that. And so sometimes when I get stressed out about, like, am I accomplishing my list? I also am like, there's also things out there that are going to happen for me that I don't even know exist yet. And they're just going to come up one day, or be in my inbox, or I'm going to meet someone at an event that says, something. So I try to just leave room for possibility too.
I love that. And as we talk about like these endless opportunities, I wanted to touch on Rachel's question before I start to copy all your homework for some more actionable items. But I'm curious for this, as we come to a wrap of 2022 and launch 2023, there are going to be lots of opportunities, endless opportunities that we all face. In Rachel's examples, it's workshops, it's conferences, it's wanting to do all the shiny things. How do you yourself prioritize those things when it seems like there's so many fun opportunities or so many different avenues to explore?
So, Rachel, this is a great question, because I have to remind myself of this, like, not just in terms of attending workshops or just like commitments and opportunities, is I think about like 2 moments. One, how I'm going to feel right before I have to do it, and 2, how I'm going to feel right after. And the reason why I do this is because, like, let's say, for example, it's an opportunity that you have to contribute to. Like, someone's asking you to go fly and be on a panel somewhere, and you could just so easily be like, yeah, like, sounds great. But I think about that moment where I have to, like, get up, go to the airport. Like, is that worth it to me? And sometimes it's yes, but sometimes it's no. So I think about, okay, what's the moment right before I'm going to have to do that thing? And because it's easy to just fire off a yes in an inbox. And what that exchange is, either the information that I'm going to be getting, and the value I'll be receiving, is that worth it? And then 2, like, after this, am I going to feel like I got a need met, or am I going to have like another laundry list of things to do? And so that kind of comes from reflecting, like, what is it that I need right now? Sometimes I just need to do something that mellows me down, like that I won't have to like do a lot of things after. And then sometimes I need tactical things, like I want to learn a new skill or learn, something. So what is it that you actually need? And think about like where you're at right before you would go and how you'd feel right after. And sometimes that'll give me the answer of what I should attend or invest in, or whether that's my time or my money.
It's always good to pause with the yes, at least for me, instead of being yes, 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 yes. Be like, think for a second,
I
one
literally have a
1,000,
gatekeeper
two
now
1,000.
because
Yeah.
I like overcommitter over here.
Yeah, exactly. Okay. Well, I'm really excited to like dig into this kind of speed round with you, because I always feel like you have such good gems for us. But I'm curious, what is it that you have started doing or using lately? It could be like an app, or it could be a certain thing that you love, you're obsessing about, you're telling all your friends to do it too.
Yeah. So this has been 1 year strong. I removed Gmail from my phone. And so I don't have email. I know, everyone take a second, gasp, like do what you got to do. I had the same reaction. I was like, there is no way that life would go on. But I told myself like a year ago, I was going to do it for a week and just see. And I will tell you, Kim, my anxiety like went low, but then also I thought like, oh my gosh, my inbox is going to be like so insane. And you realize like just how manageable it is to do it in batches. Like, yeah, maybe I'll come into my inbox the next day and I have 50 to 100 emails, but it's not anything that I'd rather do that in the spurt of an hour than like in 5-minute increments 24/7. And I think that we have like a really unhealthy expectation of like being available to people all the time. I know that's for me too. Like unread messages like are my, the thing that drives me crazy. I'm like, I have to get back to them. And so just removing that pressure and only doing email on my computer has been a game changer for me. Yeah.
Okay,
And I
maybe that's
know it seems like a
something.
big leap, but try it for a week. Just give yourself a week.
That could be something that we need to add to like the December try it list, because December can kind of be
December's
a
a good
slow
time
month,
to try it too, because a lot of people, that's how, when I started, a lot of people are logging off anyway. And so it's not in a super chaotic season where you can kind of go on the shallow end before you go on the deep end. But I think it's always a great revelation for me when I realize how unimportant I am. Like anything that tells me that, like you think like I can't go on vacation because like what if the world collapses? And then you realize you can be off the grid for 5 days and things are fine,
and it's all going to be okay.
Yeah.
It's all going to be okay. Okay. Well, speaking of, chasing the bright side and bright ideas, I have this concept that we now are really the summation of not just the 5 people we spend the most time with in person, but the 5 accounts or digital humans or people that we haven't met yet, but we follow on social media. We are the culmination of all of that and those ideas. Yeah. So I'm curious whether it could be Instagram, it could be TikTok, it could be LinkedIn, it could be people accounts, it could be brands or authors. What are some accounts that you follow and on what platform that you just feel like they really light you up? They really inspire you. You're always kind of getting something good when their stuff pops up on your screen.
Well, from a brand perspective, like I think I echo probably a lot of people that I've been totally blown away with Patagonia this year and just like the decisions that they've made as a company. And truly, like when it goes back to the purpose test of like if your name wasn't attached to it or if like you weren't the owner, it's just like they walk the walk, like they don't just talk the talk. And so it's been really admirable to watch them as a brand. People, one account that I've been really loving specifically here on LinkedIn, I don't think she even knows I exist. Her name is Madison Butler, and she started a resource called the Black Speakers Collection because, obviously in speaking, there's a lot of people who look alike, and there's like, in fact, there's only like 30% of speakers are Black or brown. And so she started an entire like roster on a whim to help events connect with Black speakers. And so Madison Butler, Black Speakers Collection, she's doing really amazing things.
Ooh, okay. We're all going to have to Google her and look that up when we log off here. Okay, last thing, we love homework, which I know sounds so weird, but we love homework around these parts. So if you could give all of us a homework assignment, could be to listen to something, could be to do something, could be to post something. I don't know. It could be anything. But if you could give us a homework assignment for the next week that we had to complete, what would it be?
So I'll go back to the removing Gmail from your phone. That is like how passionate I feel about that. Alexandra, it is possible and you can do it. And I want you to personally reach out to me after you've done your week and tell me how it was. But like on top of that, even if you're not ready to remove it from your phone yet, I think a other way that you could do it is like just airplane mode in the mornings, even if it's for 30 minutes, or I would love for it to be an hour, but there's a lot of studies and research that go around like where we get our dopamine first thing in the morning. So if you're like me and you would like turn your alarm off on your phone and immediately click into an app, then your first dopamine hit is going to be from other people or going to be from your phone. And so if you can like not do that, then it's just really helpful to train like just literally your brain levels and like where you're getting your dopamine for the rest of the day, because it's like a dog and a treat, which is crazy, but I've just been victim to it. And I know so many people have, and it's like, I want to get my dopamine from like me seeing my dog in the morning or like saying hello to my husband. I don't want to get my dopamine from a notification. So once you can kind of make that decision, it's helpful, whether that's removing it from your phone, Gmail, or just giving yourself that like 30-minute to an hour window in the morning where you don't click an app.
Just some space.
Just some space. And again, December is a great month to try it. People are like, let's circle back after the new year anyway. Like we're in that season. So let's give it a shot.
Totally. Okay. I always want to ask this question because I think most people don't realize, but as someone that has a new book coming out, if there are people today like me that are thinking, yeah, this sounds like a book that I want to buy for my niece, for my nephew, for my daughter, for my son, etc. All platforms are not created equal. So which platform, if we're going to buy this book, do you, Jess, make the most money from? Because that's the one that I want to buy it from.
That's a great question. So because I went through my publisher's HarperCollins and I went through a traditional publisher, I make the same no matter where the book is bought. But obviously my preference would be if you have a local bookstore and they can order it for you or they are already carrying it, like that is the way to go. And if you're a fan of audiobooks, there's a company called Libro.fm, and they basically sell audiobooks through local bookstores. And so I think you can actually order the audiobook and pick a local store that they sell it through. And so any chance you can do local is great, but I'll make the same either way. But that's really an awesome question. No one's ever asked me that before.
It's important. And by the way, bookshop.org, if anyone's looking to kind of order local with that same Amazon click effect, bookshop.org is a
I'll have to check that out. I didn't even know that.
Jess, this has been so much fun. Thank you for taking the time. So appreciate it. And I know you're limiting all of your apps and whatnot. So where do you spend the most time if people want to follow you and keep learning from you?
Yes. Even though I'm limiting my apps, let's just be real. I'm still on them like between majority of my day. I'm trying to spend more time here on LinkedIn. So definitely shoot me a follow here. But I also have a hype text that I send out every Monday with just some like food for thought or words of encouragement. So if you want to get on that, that's where I spend a lot of my time too, is because I can actually respond to text that way. You can text me the word hype to 704-228-9495. And then you'll get that every Monday at 11 a.m. Eastern.
Oh, I love it. Well, thank you, Jess, so much. This has been so fun. And thank you, everyone, for joining. Really appreciate it. As always, we are here on Wednesdays at 1 p.m. Eastern. We'll be back next week, same time, same place. Until then, I hope you have a lovely rest of the week, and we will see you next week.
Thanks,
Bye,
Kim.
everybody.
Thanks, everyone.